Right, hi everybody. Welcome to the Stage 6 Summary of Progress moderation session. So this is to support you as a CBM to complete the Summary of Progress as we come to the end of Stage 6. Some of you might be quite familiar with it because you have completed it before. Some of you might be quite new to completing this summary, and hopefully this session will help you to think about what types of things you might want to include in the report. So first of all, I'll just share the aim for the session with you. So I'll just let you read that slide there. So there will be a chance today for you to go into a breakout room just to share your thoughts and questions and queries that you might have with fellow CBMs, and then we'll have a chance at some point to come back together, and I will try to answer all of the questions that you have if you do have any. Okay, so let's move on to how we actually access the Summary of Progress. So the Summary of Progress, you will likely to meet your skit teacher's lead mentor either next week or the week after, and the deadline is the 20th of June. So on Mosaic, this is what it looks like. If you go to your skit teacher's profile and down the left-hand side to review points, you can click into review points and you choose the first one at the top there, which is Stage 6 Summary of Progress. When you go into the Stage 6 Summary of Progress, this is what it will look like. So you can see that there is a general section at the top, and then there are 6 sections, one for each theme of the curriculum, and then one at the bottom which is focused on Part 2, personal and professional conduct. We will go through each of the sections today, and hopefully I can give you some pointers and some ideas of what to include in each section. Whenever I complete one of these, I tend to start at section 1, behaviour and expectations, and complete all of the themes of the curriculum and Part 2, and then I tend to go back to the general section to complete the strengths and areas of development or next steps at this stage. So that kind of helps me to make sure that I've completed each section, but up to you how you want to complete that. So we use the assessment framework to complete the Stage 6 Summary of Progress. So on the screen there, you can see the Stage 6 assessment framework for primary. This is in a guide to training towards the back in the appendices, and the secondary one looks like this, and that's also in a guide to training as well. So if you do want to have a paper copy in front of you, you can go to your guide to training and it is towards the back of that document. However, what we also do as well, once you've clicked into what each of the themes of the curriculum on the review, so for example, if you click into behaviour and expectations, the questions at the top do relate to the information in the assessment framework for that particular theme. So for behaviour and expectations, you can see there that those questions relate directly to the assessment framework. If you answer all of those questions, then you will have completed the Summary of Progress in relation to the assessment framework. So you can just work through each of those questions and write down your thoughts, really. What we would rather you do is to provide examples which we can talk about this evening, rather than just kind of regurgitating those questions that you see there. So we want to kind of put a little bit more detail in there to ensure that we've got that really holistic view of your skit teacher and each of the themes of the curriculum. I think it's also worth sharing with you that when we do get references for skit teachers, the skit team, we do go to the stage Summary of Progresses to have a look at what's been written by the CBM and the lead mentor, and that really helps us to write a reference. So if you kind of have that in mind, you know, it really helps you to kind of think about the amount of detail and the way that it should be written to support us writing a reference, but also to illustrate what the skit teacher can do in each of the themes of the curriculum. So the bottom bit there where it says review of progress, for each theme of the curriculum, it will ask you to identify whether the skip teacher has met or not met this particular aspect of the framework. So where before you might have had to put on track or not on track, because we were coming towards the end of the training year, we are going to ask you to say met or not met. For each of the theme, your skip teacher should have met the expectations within each theme so that we can recommend them for QTS. If there are any sections that say not met, then that is going to cause an issue in terms of us being able to recommend them. Now, we're not saying that skip teachers can't have targets. Absolutely they can, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but they must have met the expectation. So when you look at these questions, just be really clear that you feel that they have met the expectation and you feel confident that the skip team are able to recommend that skip teacher for QTS. So you click whether they have met or not met, and then we've got a section here where you're going to write your comments there. So just remember, if you complete the summary of progress, when you meet your lead mentor, there is time within that meeting to tweak the wording, or if you're not sure what to include in this section, or you're not sure how to word it, your lead mentor can help you there, and you can kind of finalise that in that meeting. So feel free to, put things in bold or highlight things that you want to double check with your lead mentor. It doesn't have to be the final piece when you come to have that key review point 3 meeting with your lead mentor and your skip teacher. So one of the things that we do think about when we are writing the summary of progress is the range of evidence, which you can see on the screen. And I'm sure you're familiar with this because it's on every mentor meeting performer, and you will have highlighted when you have drawn on that range of evidence to complete the mentor meeting. So in terms of ensuring that we've got that breadth of that range of evidence within the summary of progress, feel free to have a look back at your mentor meetings, and you might be able to kind of pull out some examples there. This is particularly important for those skip teachers who we feel might be quite borderline. So those, there's maybe a handful of skip teachers who might still be requiring a certain level of support, and where we are saying that we do recommend them for QTS, we acknowledge that actually they're still needing a little bit of support there. And that's fine, as long as we can say that we have drawn on the full range of evidence to demonstrate that they meet the expectation for stage 6 and then ultimately QTS. And we also recognise that they do also have another 2 years of ECT training. So it's not just about them being the finished product now. They do have another 2 years, and as you all understand, further training after that. So, we want them to be ECT ready, but by no means are they the finished product in that sense. So what I'm going to do is I'll pop you into a breakout room now, and I just want to give you a couple of minutes just to have a chat with your fellow CBMs, just in terms of this range of evidence, just an opportunity for you to kind of identify any that you have found you've drawn on more than others, any that you have really struggled to kind of think about how you can draw on that range of evidence. It might be one that you've not really highlighted much in the mentor meetings. And if that's the case, then fellow CBMs, you might be able to offer some suggestions and advice as to how you can incorporate that piece of evidence there in the final few mentor meetings that you do have with your skip teacher, but also to write the summary of progress as well. So I will pop you into a breakout room. We're quite a small group, so I'll only put you in a few rooms, and I'll just give you a few minutes just to have a quick chat around that. Okay, so I'll give you around 3 minutes, and I'll see you back in a few. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or queries around the range of evidence?
We were just talking about in terms of the assessment, the formative assessment we've been able to sort of, look at and talk about, monitor as they're teaching, but we've just found it a bit tricky to think of the overall summative assessment and pupil progress over a longer period because of the sort of, times when they've not been there, and then we've had sort of gaps, obviously, where they've been at the other placements, or there's just been a lot of days out, which we understand, obviously, because they've had to have all the training around all the practical side of things as well. So what would you recommend in terms of sort of commenting on that particular area then?
So for one of the expectations of stage 6 was to complete a pupil progress meeting.
Yeah.
And that might have been either them joining one that is already planned within your school, or having that kind of professional dialogue with yourself.
Yeah.
So within that meeting, hopefully they've demonstrated that they've got that understanding of the progress that pupils have made. So you can really kind of draw on that.
Yeah.
To kind of demonstrate that. I know it wasn't in stage 6, but they did complete a reading impact, pupil progress impact report. So again, I know that was in stage 4, but
Yeah.
it does kind of demonstrate that they have that understanding of that pupil progress.
Yeah, which I've seen. My student has sort of shown me that as well. Yeah, so my student missed the actual pupil progress meeting that we had because she was on one of her other training days. But could I just sort of talk about the dialogue that we've had between us then, in terms of looking at the overall pupil progress and how?
Yeah, and it might be when if you've had an assessment week where you've had those summative assessments taking place, where you might have worked with your skip teacher to kind of input it onto school systems, and as you've done that, you might have had conversations around the progress that pupils have made. If you've had any moderation sessions taking place, those types of things are really good examples of what you can put within the summary of progress. I think another element of that is actually their understanding of progress that pupils are making from what they've picked up on a day-to-day basis or at the end of units and topics, and how that's being fed into their planning for the next week or the next unit. And that's kind of demonstrating that their understanding of pupil progress.
That's fine, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Najma. Any other comments before we move on to each of the themes of the curriculum? Okay, if anything does pop up, please just there'll be a chance in a while to ask any questions, or you can pop it into the chat. That's absolutely fine. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go through each of the themes of the curriculum, and feel free to jot down some notes of things that might help you to complete the summary of progress that you might not have really thought about before. So this is just a chance for you to kind of gather a few more ideas really of what you can include. So I'll just go through each one, and then, like I said, at the end we'll have chance for a few questions. So in terms of the first theme of the curriculum, which is behaviour and expectations, so when you're thinking about whether or how well they support pupil wellbeing, you can kind of think about whether they draw on any strategies to support individual pupils or groups of pupils. Do they use any SEMH approaches to support individual pupils? And that might be in line with what is currently in place in your school. So, for example, if you use Happy Mind or you are a Happy Mind school, you might use those techniques to support pupils in the class. How have they built those relationships with pupils? Have they developed those really positive, caring relationships with the children that they're working with? And how have they done that? Have they supported on trips? Have they been on a residential? Have they supported in clubs or led a club themselves? So really kind of thinking about all those things that might support kind of that demonstration of their understanding of supporting pupil wellbeing. And then moving on to communication with parents, obviously, thinking about parents' evenings, have they had an opportunity to feed back to parents about the progress that their child is making? It might be that every day they check in with parents, it might be on the door when they're saying goodbye. It might be in the morning, have they got that communication with parents? And then thinking about classroom environment, have they created or contributed to a working wall, maybe to demonstrate that sequential learning in a unit of maths or in English? Do they have an understanding of how that working wall supports the children's learning? And then thinking about whether they put well-being at the centre of what they do. So in terms of safeguarding, do they have a really good understanding of safeguarding in general, but also what safeguarding looks like in your school? Do they follow the procedures? Have they had an opportunity to follow the procedures within school in terms of safeguarding? And they might have had conversations with you about the procedures that are in place and the safeguarding processes that you have to follow. So in terms of maintaining those high expectations, are they following behaviour policies? Do they manage behaviour well? And do they manage it as you would expect within the policies within your school? Do they manage the class effectively? Do they have a really good understanding of what motivates the class as a whole? What motivates individual pupils or groups of pupils? Do they use sanctions? Do they put rewards in place to motivate those pupils? And in terms of working as part of a wider team of staff in relation to those behaviour expectations, do they understand the expectations in terms of behaviour? Do they understand how they can work with you as their CBM or other staff and other adults within the school? So not just you in the classroom, there might be support staff, there might be learning mentors, obviously SLT. Do they have that understanding and are they able to draw on those key members throughout school? But then equally, do they support other staff in terms of behaviour management and follow the behaviour management policy as well? When we talk about each theme of the curriculum, we're also thinking about how we can draw on the range of evidence that we've just talked about. So thinking about, answering each of these questions, but how do I know that? Well, it might be through observation, it might be through discussions with other colleagues, it might be conversations that you've had with them through the mentor meeting. It might be what pupils have told you about them. Or again, it might be those observations that you've had in terms of the relationship that they have with pupils. So thinking about, yes, answering these questions, but thinking about that range of evidence that you can draw on. Okay, so let's move on to pedagogy then. So when you're looking at the pedagogy section, some examples of what you can include are where they have planned a sequence of lessons and thinking about whether they could identify how they've improved their practice within that sequence of lessons. You could also link this section to their subject and curriculum knowledge. So you might be able to say that they have planned a sequence of lessons in history. They've identified a number of gaps in their subject knowledge, and this is what they've done about it. So pedagogy and subject and curriculum knowledge do kind of go hand in hand sometimes, and it's okay to kind of cross-reference across a number of themes of the curriculum rather than sticking to one theme. When we're thinking about whether SCIT teachers meet the needs of all pupils through adaptive teaching, so stage 4 was very much around adaptive teaching and understanding different types of scaffolding. Are they able to adapt their teaching strategies to support all pupils. You might be able to give examples of when they have used resources to provide that scaffold. They might use staff effectively. They might be able to flexibly group pupils. And you know, the flexible bit is the important bit because it changes regularly and it changes from subject to subject. You might be able to give other examples as well. So, for example, through their questioning that they use. Feel free to have a look back at lesson observations that you've done to try and pull out some examples. And what I've done before is actually, if I can't think of an example, I might ask the skit teacher to give me an example of when you've used scaffolding to support all pupils in the class, and they should be able to tell you that. If that's missing, if your lead mentor feels that there aren't enough examples, then that key review point 3 meeting will be an opportunity to just add in a few more examples. So don't worry too much if you feel that, oh, I can't think of an example. There will be chance within that meeting to be able to do that. And I think I mentioned the content of your weekly mentor meetings. So it might be that you've had discussions with your skit teacher around their understanding of pedagogy and teaching sequences of lessons. You can draw on that as well and put in that you've had those professional discussions with your skit teacher on a weekly basis. So moving on to subject and curriculum knowledge, kind of going back to what we said around planning. So do they understand the features of effective planning? That was one of the very first sessions that they did way back in September, and they hopefully have demonstrated that they know what good teaching looks like because they are able to identify those key features on their planning. And you can see that when you're observing them, and you can see that through the discussions that you have on an informal basis every day or in your PPA meetings when you're talking about planning. Throughout all of these themes, you might want to draw on the fact that you have delivered some instructional coaching to support the skit teacher. So if your skit teacher has used instructional coaching specifically around their subject knowledge or their curriculum knowledge, you can put it in this section here. But it's always really great to see some examples of how instructional coaching has been used, but also the impact it's had on your skit teacher's practice. So again, thinking about the needs of all pupils, are they able to adapt their teaching? Those kind of generic teaching strategies, but actually also on the subject knowledge and the curriculum knowledge. So thinking about, do they have a really good understanding of prior knowledge? Do they understand what pupils were taught in a specific subject prior to the current topic or in the previous year? Do they understand how what they're teaching now builds on what the pupil is going to be taught in the future within that subject? So it's kind of demonstrating their understanding within that sequence of learning. And like I said before, we're not expecting skit teachers to be the finished product, that if they have gaps in their knowledge, that's okay, as long as we identify what they've done about it. So they might have a specific gap in a particular subject, but what have they done about it? How are they addressing that gap? So you might be able to give some examples around that. So it might be that they've done some self-study, they've spoken to the subject leader, they've spoken to you about it, they've accessed future planning. It might be planning from the following year group, so that they can make sure that they have got that really good subject knowledge ready to teach the current subject. Okay, so moving on to assessment. So we kind of touched on this earlier on when we were talking about the range of evidence, when Najma was talking about assessment. So just a reminder, you can draw on the what you know about them contributing to or leading that pupil progress meeting. Are they able to talk about the next steps for pupils? do they understand the progress that pupils have made, and actually what does that pupil need to be able to do to get to kind of meet their target for the end of this year and moving into the next academic year. And that might be in discussion with you or with other colleagues as well. We mentioned also, do they understand how to use school systems to input data, but also can they use the school systems to analyse what the data is telling them? At this level, it might be with you to support them and to help them to understand what the data is telling them, but it is about them being able to access those school systems and start to unpick what information it is telling you. Have they got an understanding around EHCPs or IEPs or equivalent of however they are called within your setting? Do they know, can they kind of unpick that EHCP and alongside you set targets using that EHCP and actually are they able to translate that into daily practice? So are they able to plan for those pupils with SEND using the targets that they've got on their EHCPs? And again, just referring back to if you have given any instructional coaching around assessment, what impact did that session have on the skip teachers' practice? That last question there around providing high quality feedback, that might be something that you have observed. You might see it in books, depending on what your feedback and marking policy looks like. If there is an expectation that your skip teacher gives written feedback, but remember to draw on that range of evidence as well. And again, they accessed an ITAP on high quality feedback just a few weeks ago. So if you're struggling to kind of think of some examples, ask your skip teacher to support you with that. Okay, so they should be able to give you examples of when they have provided high quality feedback to the pupils in their class. Okay, let's move on to professional behaviours. Okay, so this section is around whether skip teachers can articulate the environment that they want to work in. So have they talked about the type of school they would like to work in? Have they talked about a particular key stage that they have a passion for? Have they started to think about kind of the locality or the size of the school? So really starting to think about where they're kind of mapping out their path of their career really, and thinking about they might not quite have got a job yet, but they are being proactive in looking for a job and starting to think about which way their career is going to go starting in September. This is really key for the general section of the summary of progress, but actually it will really support the skip teacher when they go to meet their ITT lead, in that they should have a really good understanding of their strengths and developmental areas. Now, everything, I always say this to skip teachers and to CBMs, everything that's written in this report shouldn't really be a surprise to the skip teacher. So it's really important that they have got a really good understanding of their strengths and developmental areas, because we don't want to, in a key review point 3 meeting, saying, well, you need to work on this, that and the other, and actually that's been a real surprise to them. So these should be things that they actually already know and that you've talked about because you've already given them that feedback. So in terms of working with, we've talked about working with wider staff teams in terms of behaviour, but there might also be or have been opportunities for the skip teacher to work with other staff across school, for example, the SENCO, I mentioned learning mentors, but also external agencies as well. So what engagement have they had with an external agency, and how did they use that to kind of positively impact on their practice? We've talked about instructional coaching quite a lot. You can also talk about their understanding of research and evidence It might be that they have they talk about research that they've engaged in within your mentor meetings. It might be in informal discussions. They have a reflective presentation coming up next week. They might have talked to you about the focus of their reflective presentation, and they might have asked you for advice and support. But it's a really good opportunity to kind of praise and acknowledge how much they've engaged with the research and evidence right throughout the programme, really. Okay, moving on to the last section, which is mental health and wellbeing. So in this section, you can identify any strategies that the SCIT teacher has in place to support their wellbeing, and how do they manage their workload. So first of all, we want to know that they are managing their workload. What do they have in place? This might be something that you ask your SCIT teacher. How are you managing your workload? How are you supporting your wellbeing? You might already know that. You might know about things that are happening outside of school. You might know about their hobbies. You might not do, depending on kind of the relationship that you have with your SCIT teacher. That's absolutely fine, but it might be a question to ask them. How are you supporting your wellbeing, and how are you managing the workload? Are they able to reflect on their own practice, which kind of links to the previous theme, in terms of, do they have that understanding of their strengths and their areas to develop, and have they got a really clear understanding of how they can get better? So yes, they've got some areas to develop, but what are they doing about it? How are they going to improve their practice? And again, drawing on the full range of evidence there. So if you need to go back through your mentor meetings, just maybe the last few, just to pull out some examples and some ideas there, if it doesn't come to mind straight away. Okay, I'm going to stop talking for 1 minute. Just feel free now just to pop anything in the chat, or just unmute yourself if you've got any questions just around those 6 themes of the curriculum, just before we finish with a few more slides as we come to the end of the session. Okay, I will move on so that we finish in time. But if you do want to talk to me at the end, I will stay on and we can have a chat. Okay, once you've done those 6 themes of the curriculum, there is a section at the end around part 2 of the teacher standards. So here again, you've got 3 questions or 3 statements, and you're going to put either they have met or not met. Again, you need to, a SCIT teacher rather, needs to have met each of these in order for the SCIT team to recommend them for QTS. And then, as I said before, it kind of works for me to do those sections and then go back to the general section, because then here you can identify whether they have met or not met the expectations for stage 6. You can identify here the strengths. So as you're writing the summary of progress, you might be able to identify 3 strengths or a number of strengths that you can put into this section. It is slightly different from the stage 4 summary of progress, because we do ask you to link to the teacher standards now rather than the themes of the curriculum, and that's because we are looking at recommending for QTS. Don't worry if you forget to do that, because your lead mentor will double check that. And then again, when you are writing your summary of progress, you might be able to identify those areas for development or those next steps that you can identify here. And again, you're going to reference to the teacher standards. This is going to really help your SCIT teacher to complete a passport to induction. So when they meet their ITT lead in a few weeks' time, their ITT lead will have a look back at this summary of progress, and they will look at these areas for development, and your SCIT teacher will pull out these areas for development to put onto a passport to induction, so that they can take that forwards into their ECT years to continue to develop their practice. So it's really important that we do provide really clear and specific areas for development at this point at the end of stage 6. And then just at the bottom there is a section for you to put a comment. Sorry, not you. That's the lead mentor. Lead mentor can put a comment there, and then your skip teacher can add a comment here as well, just maybe summarising the progress that they've made over stage 6. And it's also a nice opportunity to say thank you to you as their CBM, and also the lead mentor for the support that they've received throughout the year. And then finally, just at the bottom of the general section, there are a number of questions, and it's just a case of reading each question and identifying whether they've met it. Again, they need to have met these in order to be compliant and recommended for QTS. Okay, so it's probably worth double checking now if, maybe if they haven't yet completed 2 mock reports, make sure that that's brought up in the next mentor meeting. If your pupil progress meeting isn't booked in, maybe get that booked in soon so that you can put a met next to each of those questions. Okay, and this is the final slide. As I mentioned at the beginning, the deadline for these summary progresses to be completed and signed off by the lead mentor is 20th of June. So we're looking at just over 2 weeks' time. Your lead mentor should have been in touch by now to book in the key review point 3 meeting. So that meeting shouldn't take any longer than an hour. And just as we did in stage 4, it's for the lead mentor, the skip teacher and yourself to finalise that summary of progress. And it always helps if the skip teacher has read that summary prior to the meeting, because it gives them the opportunity to identify anything that they want to query or anything that they want to suggest to add. Just a few dates there, just to make a note of. There is a final hub day for primary skip teachers on the 23rd of June, so they won't be in school on that day. The end of the programme for all skip teachers apart from apprentices is the 4th of July. If your skip teacher is an apprentice, then they will stay in school until the end of the academic year. And there is a celebration event for all skip teachers, regardless of whether they're apprentices or not, on the 7th of July. So don't expect your skip teacher, if they are an apprentice, to be in school on the 7th of July, because they will be at their celebration event. Primary skip teachers will have an opportunity to attend a Key Stage 3 placement, or Key Stage 3 setting rather, in the last 2 weeks. So hopefully your skip teacher will let you know when that is happening. And I've mentioned ITT leads a number of times. Those meetings will begin in the week beginning the 23rd of June. That shouldn't take more than an hour. Hopefully your skip teacher's ITT lead will come to your school, but it might be that your skip teacher has to come out of school to visit their ITT lead. But they will, ITT leads will be in touch in the next week or so. Okay, thank you all very much for coming to the session today. I'm just going to stop the recording.